proper exposure to the British accent. I walk into school and this guy's looking at me. He looks at me like, mate, can you pass me the what? Like, can you pass me the what? And I'm like, bawa.
Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are safe and doing good. So the clip that you just saw was an excerpt from this actor and comedian Varun Thakur's stand-up special from Amazon. And by watching that clip, I guess you all have a pretty clear idea of what today's video is gonna be about. Yes, you're right, my friends. It is gonna be all about accent. Accent is a specific way of pronouncing words that is connected with a particular country, area, or social class. It is the relative prominence given to a particular syllable of a word or phrase by greater intensity or modulation or variation of pitch and tone. Now, this prominence given to a particular syllable of a word can be in terms of differential loudness, pitch, tone, length, or can be a combination of all of these. Now, before we move on, I want you all to understand this very clearly. See, accent and pronunciation, they pretty much go hand in hand. They are in, let's say, a direct proportion to one another and affect each other in multiple ways. So if you want your speech to be in a certain accent, you need to work on your pronunciation according to that. And that is why, apart from the tips that I'll be giving you in this video, all the ones that we had discussed in my pronunciation video will also be applicable here. But before we do that, let us address this very crucial question, that is, why even working on your accent is important. People who are learning English as a second language often come across a very frustrating problem. See, they work really hard to be able to speak with good grammar, accurate vocabulary, and relevant expressions. Yet when they speak, they oftentimes get responses like, "I'm sorry, what?" Or, "Could you repeat that, please?" It is extremely annoying, and I know that. And if you do not work on your accent, your fluency in the language will get constantly affected by this. So, working on your accent is as important as working on other aspects of the language. And language learners often neglect owning a good accent in favor of focusing on, let's say, grammar and vocabulary. But it is of grave importance to work on your accent too. So now that we have understood why honing a good accent is important, let us tackle the second crucial question, that is, why some people do not work on their accent. So with all the research that I have done on the internet about the same question, I can give you two important reasons why people do not work on their accent. Firstly, there are the psychological reasons. They are the learner's own thoughts and emotions. See, people are afraid of making mistakes when they are exposed to something new. In our case, a new accent, like having long pauses or having to repeat yourself or getting the pronunciation of a word wrong can make people feel embarrassed about themselves. And then this embarrassment can make them give up early on in their training. Now, we have to remind ourselves that mistakes are important as they act as lessons for us to learn from. They help us grow and become a better version of ourselves. So my tip for you is, do not be afraid of making mistakes and do not feel embarrassed of making them. It's completely a natural process, so do not shy away from them. Secondly, there are the physical aspects of accent. This is the movement of mouth, your lips, tongue, and other muscles involved when speaking. Now, if you generally are not good with making sounds, this particular skill can be hard to learn. But then again, everything takes practice, so does accent. So if you are afraid of making mistakes at this point of time, you will be missing out on this very important physical practice. People generally think that having a good accent is because of talent. Well, that is not always true, my friends. People who have a good accent got to that level by right methods, by putting in the efforts and practice, and more importantly, having the right attitude. So my friends, you too can reach to that level of success with accent by having the right advice and the right attitude. Sorry about that. If you think the accent of English language is tricky and impossible, then you might just be using the wrong methods, my friend. See, I agree with it being tricky, but not certainly impossible. With that being said, I present to you 5 practical tips for you to improve your accent in English language. Starting off with tip number 1, learn the phonetic alphabet. Now, you all will remember from our previous video that we talked briefly about the International Phonetic Alphabet IPA chart, which is a standard visual representation of all the 44 sounds that exist in English language. Now, getting familiar with the phonetic alphabet will help you recognize sounds easily and will provide you with, let's say, some markers that will help you navigate throughout the language. And familiarity with a language's phonemes will help you understand those sounds that your ear isn't used to listening natively. And once you develop that habit of recognizing sounds naturally, you'll start noticing them way more often when both you're speaking and you're listening. So by becoming aware of the range of sounds that exist in English language, you will learn how to differentiate between the sounds that seem similar to the untrained ears, and that will eventually make your spellings easier. And when you learn the spellings in an easier way, this will naturally improve your accent. And this tip is especially helpful when you're learning primarily by reading and listening. Tip number 2, get familiar with the spoken language. It's time for you to switch from theory to practice. Expose yourself to English as much as you can. I know it's easier said than done, but try speaking as often as possible. Also, if you are having trouble pronouncing a certain word, ask someone else to repeat it for you, and while they are doing so, record it on your phone. Now sit back, replay it, and now you can train your pronunciation and in turn your accent as often as you wish. You can also take the help from online dictionaries if you want to know how to pronounce a word correctly. And that is how, my friend, you develop the habit of learning things in English. You all remember how I keep talking about developing a habit of thinking in English. This is the next step to it. Once you have developed that habit of thinking in English, now you have to start learning each and everything in the language. So my friends, it's time for you to up your game. Start listening to English podcasts or watching English television shows. Even if you cannot understand anything now, just develop a habit of putting them on in the background while you're doing your daily chores. This way, you'll get used to those particular melodies or unfamiliar sounds that trouble you the most. And you will see with this thing, you'll see your understanding of the language and the accent improving effortlessly. Tip number 3, identify what's weird about pronunciation. With this exposure, you will quickly notice that English language has many sounds in common with your native language, even if those sounds are written differently. Now, once you have identified those sounds, you can now focus upon those sounds that do not exist in your native language. Now at this point, resist the temptation of simply comparing those unfamiliar sounds with the familiar sounds from your native language. See, this might seem like a useful shortcut to you, but trust me, it's a bad habit that will make your accent even harder to correct in long run. Ignoring the peculiar sounds in English will at best make you sound silly, and at worst can result in you actually saying the wrong words. So if you have trouble with a particular phoneme, I would suggest you to write it down alongside the similar but somewhat different sounding phonemes. Now read them out aloud several times. This will help you understand those nuances and master those small differences that make the big impact in the long run. Alright? Tip number 4. Listen, listen, listen. As I've already mentioned, the internet gives you plenty of audio materials that can help you in improving your pronunciation and in turn your accent. So listen as much and as regularly as possible. Also, instead of just focusing on the grammar and vocabulary, dedicate some time to the phonetic aspects of language. Pick up a short audio track, for example, and then focus on the breaks, the rhythms, the intonation out there. Try to understand what is giving a sentence its fluidity and then try to imitate it. Also, if you're watching an English movie, for example, it's time for you to turn off those subtitles and keep your eyes glued to the actor's mouth, because that will tell you how you have to move your mouth in order to produce those particular sounds. If you find it too hard, just slow down the video or the audio that you're listening. Most digital players allow you to do this these days. Even you can slow down YouTube videos. I hope you know that. And by doing that, you can focus on each syllable and each sound separately. On the other hand, if your comprehension level is already quite good, you can challenge yourself by accelerating the speed. So this kind of a concentration is a good practice for all those who aspire to become fast talking speakers. So do practice like this. Tip number 5, the final tip of the day: practice makes you perfect. See, training your accent requires some skill and patience. So do not get demotivated, as it won't come immediately. To maximize efficiency, you should be frequent with your training. I mean, no longer than 2 days gap between 2 sessions. That is the ideal way to train. So collect newspaper articles or scripts or lyrics and then sit them and record yourself while you speak them out aloud. Once you have done that, now it's time for you to analyze those recordings and find out what are your strengths and your weaknesses, or what native language habits are you carrying over to English. You can also ask for the help of a native language speaker, native English speaker, if you know any, or someone in your vicinity whom you know that have a good knowledge of the language. The whole point here is that you have to be consistent with your practices. So please do not stay short of that, because that is the stepping stone, the key to you improving your accent in the long run. So to conclude, accent can be tricky, but do not lose hope. The more you speak and the more feedback you get, the better your accent will become. On that note, I conclude this video for you all. I hope it was worthwhile your time. Also, do not worry about the IPA part, the phonetics part. I'll be covering all of them in the future videos. Separately, individual videos will be there in detail. Cool? So, till we meet again, take care, stay safe, and thank you for listening to me. Bye-bye. Cheers.